Dmitry, thank you so much for joining me again. It's great to have you back on the channel. Please do introduce yourself for those who may not know who you are.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me on. Dmitry Shakhnevich is my name. I'm a criminal and civil lawyer here in New York City. I also teach. I'm a professor of various things, and I run a YouTube channel where I talk about the law and interview people in the law generally and other interesting things. And if you want to check that out, that'd be great. And subscribe and do all the things that folks do on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@DShakLaw, DSHAK Law, LAW. So thank you for having me on. I appreciate it again.
No worries, man. Definitely go check his credentials out, Dimitri's. It will be in the bio below, guys. You can definitely look them over when it comes to his content on YouTube, especially. But before we even get into the questions that I have for you, like your initial response, reaction, this PDD case, the lawsuit, I'm sure you know about it and have read through it, but over the past couple of weeks, it's been absolute chaos. What is your initial reaction to all of this? Because you said to me that this happened right behind your house, right? Or near your place in New York where everything took place.
Well, not in my house, but my office
Yeah.
is nearby there. Yeah. So this was filed in the courts here in New York City. And, the lawsuit initially was settled very quickly, and then other allegations arose and things of that nature. And people are coming out and proclaiming innocence, proclaiming guilt, doing all these things. This isn't a criminal case. We don't know if there's any investigation criminally. Even if there would be a charge or an indictment, he would still be presumed innocent. So we have to really be careful when we kind of blend those two worlds. The lawsuits at this point that have come, may come, will be seeking money, not to put him in jail. Only the police and prosecutors and the criminal court system can do that. So it's important to keep that in mind, and it's important to track whether or not this trend will continue here.
Do you think it will continue? Because he's currently facing two fresh lawsuits outside of the one with Cassie. And, there seems to be a lot of, okay, evidence is a strong word, but a lot of videos that have, resurfaced in regards to him drugging and R-wording with other rappers, confessing in old videos, in interviews. So it is, which gives credence. But do you think there will be more lawsuits coming his way? Because I believe there was a Survivors Act that just expired quite recently. And I'm not sure, but I did read something about how, roughly 400 to 600 new files were, put in place. So, and perhaps it's one of those that might be revealed in time. But do you think more lawsuits, will be coming his way?
So the Adult Survivors Act is a law that arose out of the Me Too movement, right? Where so much came to the forefront, and then women that were assaulted years and decades ago came out and said, well, we're out of luck. This isn't fair, right? Because there are laws in place called statutes of limitations that limit when somebody can sue you for something, right? The period of time after which an act took place for somebody to be civilly held accountable for that act, basically. And what the folks here in New York did and in other places is they enacted this law called the Adult Survivors Act that extended that statute with an expiration date that took place a few weeks ago. And so that's why all of these lawsuits were filed. P. Diddy lawsuit, and then there was a Cuomo lawsuit, and Eric Adams, and a bunch of other people.
Right.
And so the number that I heard was well over the number you heard, but who knows? I don't know if the statistics on this will ever be real clear. But that is why that's a New York thing, right? Every state has a different statute of limitations. So we will see, right? The question really becomes whether or not evidence or information rather, in some of these cases can be used in others, right? If the answer is yes, it can get all this other stuff to show a pattern or a scheme. And there's a complex body of law as to whether or not that would be admissible in court. The lawyers would have to fight over that over time. So that's something to keep an eye on now.
So there were several attorneys speaking out over the past couple of days, looking at PDD and Cassie's case. I'm not sure if you're aware of this or what your thoughts are on this, but of course, Cassie made the clever move, or her lawyers did, to not just sue him, but also his corporations, which triggers, insurance policies and really puts him in that place where, he settled quite quickly, or perhaps it was out of his choice, leading him to leave his companies. What is your opinion on, Cassie's lawyers taking it to that perspective? Obviously, I think it's genius, but I'm not a lawyer. So, what is your perspective on that?
If you're a lawyer representing somebody in a case like this, then your duty is to your client. And what that means is you always sue as many people and companies as possible, as long as you can do it in good faith, to make sure that your client is protected, right? Because when you're in a statute of limitations case, meaning a case that is very close to having the statute run, the last thing you want to do is keep somebody out of the lawsuit. And then later on, it may turn out that that person or company are responsible, and now you're out of luck and your client suffers as a result, right? Lawyers can get in trouble for that. So that is one of the reasons why these lawsuits are so broad in terms of their scope and in terms of the parties involved. But beyond that, in terms of insurance, oftentimes, not always, insurance disclaims what are called intentional acts, right? In other words, insurance companies don't always cover intentional torts, battery, assault, and things of that nature. So I don't think that was the reason. I think it was primarily to make sure that if any of these entities are held accountable later on, they're not out of the lawsuit and therefore client suffers, right? That was the idea. Now, if you notice also in a lot of these lawsuits, there were parties named called John, Jane Doe, right? That's basically a placeholder that lawyers include. If and when somebody else comes out later on down the line, you can insert those people in place of the John or Jane Doe. So all of these legal maneuvers are done by the plaintiff's lawyer to protect the plaintiff. That's the bottom line.
Right. Amazing, man. I don't really have any other questions. It was just a very quick 10-minute run through just to see, this whole situation and your points when it comes to P. Diddy and, this lawsuit. But it definitely looks like, well, I have an inclination that he might be facing more that might be coming his way, especially with the track record and people are speaking out and, not in the court of law, but they're all speaking out in the public opinion. So this case is very interesting because I feel like it's one of the most prolific worst ones I've seen in the last 10, 15 years. Somebody who's a billionaire entrepreneur who's just, fallen so quickly. Do you see P. Diddy, as a legal standpoint, if you were, on his, his side or his lawyer in this particular instance, what would be the rough steps that one would take?
Well, you can't look. Number one, and he knows this, he's been through this before, he has very good lawyers, right? So he should make sure there are no statements that are made, no press conferences, no comments, things of that nature that may be held against him down the line. If and when, there's something in the criminal realm, he'll have to deal with that then. I think that's his biggest concern, and it may never get there. We have no reason to think that it will. And again, it's important not to speculate when it comes to these things. But I think that is, when you look at a lot of these cases, sometimes they have parallel civil and criminal cases. I think that's his main concern. Right. But for now, that hasn't happened yet. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Right. I think that was a very important what you said, the parallel of something that is currently civil and only civil as of right now, but how it can easily turn criminal. I mean, if they both kind of align, and that's what it might be looking like, if they choose to prosecute him, which I don't think would take place as of right now. I think it's way too soon for any kind of criminal prosecution, but I think that would be his biggest worry, ending up in jail.
Yeah, it depends on the statuses of any criminal investigations to the degree that there are any. Right. There may not be any. Right. It's important, again, to make sure we keep all those things in mind. Criminal cases are different than civil cases, right? Civil cases, you have to hire a lawyer that's willing to file a lawsuit in good faith. That's all you really need in a civil case. In a criminal case, you got to get the state, the government, to commit to a prosecution on your behalf, spend a whole lot of money, cross their T's, dot their I's, only charge if they can convict, if they think they can convict beyond a reasonable doubt, contend with high-end lawyers and investigators. And that's a big commitment. So we don't know if that'll ever happen, but it's not happening right now, and that's important.
Thank you very much, Dmitriy. I appreciate your, legal opinions always when it comes to these public situations. And for sure, hopefully we'll be speaking soon about what might happen next. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.